Good evening, Uganda. You're listening to 933 KFM. This is the Monday edition of the Hot Seat, and standing in for Patrick Kamara is me, Kwezi Tabaro. Today in studio, I'll be joined by David Lewis Rubongoya, who is a lawyer and Secretary General of the National Unity Platform, the leading opposition party in the country. And over the next 50 or so minutes, we'll be talking about politics within and outside NUP, as well as preparations for the upcoming elections in 2026. My producer tells me that Mr. Rubongoya is held up in jam, but I hope we'll be able to access him on the phone as he makes his way into studio. David Lewis, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Good evening to you, and a good evening to all those listening in to us.
Yes, good evening, and sorry about the traffic hold-up. Hopefully you'll be able to join us in studio in the next segment. Now, to set us rolling, kindly give us an update. What is the party up to lately?
Well, NUP is still involved in the struggle for liberation, the struggle for freedom and democracy, and we are doing different activities in that regard. Recently, so our petition was gazetted. Of course, previously we had our nationwide tour, which was eventually blocked by the police and military, but we've continued to do other activities nonetheless. You've seen us hold football matches across the country, amid so many challenges, police blockades and that kind of thing. So we are doing different things on different levels. Our party runs under 10 departments, and each of these departments is always doing something different. Of course, like I said, unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation having to respond, to spend a lot of time responding to repression. That's why almost every week we are filing new cases about missing persons, about our leaders who are abducted, and members. So but we are holding the fort, trying to mobilize and really rally the country for change.
And how is the new leadership in Parliament? Recently, you had a change in the leader of opposition. The Honorable Matthias Mpuga was replaced by the Honorable Joel Senyonyi. How is Joel's leadership shaping along?
So far, so good. I think it was, like you see, a seamless transition. Honorable Matthias Mpuga is the commissioner. He's a commissioner in Parliament, and other leaders. So, as you know, there was not an entire overhaul. It was just a change of responsibilities, really, new leaders taking on different roles. And yes, Honorable Senyonyi, as you've seen, has, started very well, first of all, pushing for the freedom of our people, raising issues to do with the selective application of the laws with regard to, what the regime calls military attire, which our people have been prosecuted for, yet the regime and its people continue to put them on without any problem. But also there's a lot going on in terms of policy development and research in his office. And the nation will be updated very soon about some of the things the office of the leader of the opposition is doing in Parliament.
Mr. Rubongoya, you said the transition was a seamless one. Many would disagree. I'm looking at a story that came out this weekend in the Sunday Vision, and they're talking about the political rift that has emerged within Nyendo Mukugwe division, which is the constituency that the Honorable Matthias Mpuga represents, and looks like the current NUP leadership is propping up a young female councillor, Miss Alice Nanunji, to take over from Honorable Matthias Mpuga. What do you have to say about that?
Well, largely that is the media reporting, and especially if it is coming from the Vision, Sunday Vision, New Vision. They've always predicted doom about our party. They spent a lot of time writing that, NUP would fall apart. So it's not surprising that they're writing that. This apparent conflict they're talking about, I only see it in the media. I don't see it internally within the party. But that notwithstanding, whenever there are any issues that emerge within our party, we sit down and discuss them. And, we are still interrogating, first of all, the source of that so-called conflict, and who is behind it, who is trying to create it. And, I believe that will you look for that story and you'll not see it because our party will, as has always been, be together.
Mr. Rubongoya, many other media houses have also captured this apparent unease within the NUP party, and some of these stories came out way before Honorable Mpuga was replaced as the LOP. So don't you think you need to cut the media some slack that perhaps there is no smoke without fire?
Well, like I said, we've seen such stories keep coming up many times, and many of them hold no water. Actually, the saying that there's no smoke without fire in this case sometimes has been completely wrong because at times you see stories coming up and you who sits at the Secretariat of NUP who interacts with these leaders cannot seem to see it. However, like I say, I know for sure that there have been some bit of challenges amongst leaders, not really at the party level, but amongst leaders. You know, now as we draw towards 2026, there is indeed jostling for positions. And of course, sometimes there are issues that emerge. And this is true for every other political party and every other formation in Uganda, because when people have different political interests, sometimes that brings an ease within those local areas. But I wouldn't want to say that that brings about a crisis in NUP as a party, because if there is a problem or if there is a contestation in any part of the country, then we should look at that as a local issue and not as a national issue that should, be looked at as an effort by the party to prop up someone against another person. You need to remember that the Honorable Mr David is our deputy president in charge of Uganda region.
That was going to be my next question because, again, according to this media report, apparently NUP party sent officials to do some groundwork within Nyendo Mukugwe constituency without his knowledge.
And that's wrong. That's why I'm telling you that story is false in material particulars. Because, like I said, Honorable Mpuga is the deputy president appointed by the president, actually. So I always find it very ridiculous. You know, for example, when he was locked for a very long time, people were, saying, oh, he's going to be replaced tomorrow. But, we came out very clearly and said that, you know what, these leaders are going to finish their term and then they will be replaced by new leaders. Even the current leaders will be replaced by other leaders, perhaps at the end of their term and that kind of thing. So there is no crisis in NUP. And that story that keeps coming up, in my view, is a creation of the media because I have not seen it. For example, it is false for anyone to say that people are doing groundwork, that officials of the party are doing groundwork in that area without his knowledge or whatever. That's absolutely not true.
Mr. Rubongoya, is it true that the NUP amended its constitution to introduce term limits for NUP flag bearer MPs?
Yes, and we were open about it. Our new constitution provides for term limits. But again, I read that story you're referring to, and there's a lot of misinformation even in that regard. Because our constitution clearly says that those term limits will start applying in the next term. Meaning that even those members of parliament and other leaders who are serving the current term are not affected in any way by that provision. So,
why would the party do that? Why don't you leave it to the voters to decide? Because many politicians think that you're trying to do this so that the NUP party leader can whip some errant members into the line.
But that's in 10 years, because like I said, the current MPs, every MP of NUP, without exception, still has 10 years ahead if the people vote that person. For us, it was a question of principle, and we came out and we explained to the nation, and indeed, majority of the people in this country agreed with us. You know, it's not us who are doing this as the first people. You know, in Kenya, for example, there are term limits on members of parliament and senators and that kind of thing. We believe that one of the problems in Uganda is indeed, as General Museveni said previously, leaders who overstay in power. So we think that people should not be in one position for a very long time. We think that we should encourage new and fresh ideas to be infused within leadership roles. And mind you, this does not only apply to members of parliament. It applies even to me as Secretary General of NUP. It applies to the president of the party. It applies to any position within NUP. We said that there should be a limit of 10 years. people should have the first term of 5 years, and if they are given a second mandate, they should serve that mandate of 5 years, and maybe they can go for a different role as opposed to staying in the same role for 20, 30 years.
The NUP is still a very young party. It's about 4 years old, but it's also now Uganda's biggest opposition party. Reflecting on the last 4 years, what would you say has been the biggest lesson learned?
Well, I think I shouldn't say the biggest lesson learned. One, on the positive side, we have been overwhelmed by the support. This idea that I think it's the challenges that we've had. You wouldn't think that after 4 years of repression, of the regime clamping down seriously in every form, you wouldn't think that you'll invite people and they come in thousands or tens of thousands for NUP activities. So for us, that has been a very, very encouraging thing. You saw what our nationwide tour looked like. People came out in hundreds of thousands in some cases. So that encouraged us to know that, yes, even when the state has unleashed a lot of violence, a lot of, all sorts of things against NUP, once you still stand on the values and on the principles and the people will be there. Of course, on the other side, on the negative side, me personally, I think as NUP, I've been amazed at the greed of some people. You see, for example, we have two members of parliament, one Kagabo and one Rwanga, who knew and who still know the difficulties which they went through to be elected to those positions. And they're not ashamed to identify with the very our people who have tortured, killed our people. So the incredible levels of greed. You would imagine, you would expect that at the level of a member of parliament, someone is beyond that. So, for me, that's one thing I can say has been very negative.
Mid last year, the party had garnered quite a lot of momentum with your nationwide rallies, and many thought that this is momentum that would continue well into this year and possibly next year ahead of 2026. What do you have to say about people who are saying that, the way NUP is running its activities, it's more in a start-stop manner and you're not generating enough momentum to give people hope ahead of 2026?
Well, we do different things and at a specific time. For example, you very well know that our president has been has been on an international offensive. There's a lot of work going on in that regard. The documentary Bobby and the People's President has been nominated for the Oscars, which is an extremely important step because now that film about the repressive regime in Uganda will be watched by millions of people across the world. And so there are different things we've been doing. So on one hand... But
Lewis, many would argue that ultimately it will be the Ugandans to decide. Don't you think that a lot more of that effort should be spent mobilizing your supporters here?
But the supporters are actually already mobilized. The biggest problem in our view is, one, the repression of the regime. Number two, the fact that the regime continues to receive a lot of support internationally. It continues to receive a lot of, aid and assistance, and which is used to actually buy weapons to repress the citizens and do all sorts of things to us. So that's one of the things why we believe that, we need to cut off some of those, pipes that keep this regime operating. And some of that is donor funding, etc., etc.
Mr. Rubongoya, do you believe that Ugandans have it within themselves to liberate themselves from what you consider oppression?
Absolutely, and we've been very clear. I've told you.
Then why do you think that President Museveni's government is only propped up by foreign aid and not some kind of indifference or support from even a small section of Ugandans?
As a matter of fact, what I've said is that we are doing things on all fronts. On one hand, we are doing a lot of activities on ground. Like I said, we had a nationwide tour, and we are going to have a second phase of that tour. But also, the international line should not be overlooked. It is extremely important because we believe, and you've seen it with many of these dictators, once they lose international support, they lose grip on power because you see, we had an election in 2021, and the people of Uganda, in our assessment, and the evidence is there, overwhelmingly voted against Museveni and his regime. They went ahead and rigged the election with impunity, declared results on gunpoint. There was nothing the citizens could do at the time because abductions were going on in incredible levels. Thousands of our supporters were missing. So, our presidential candidate was under house arrest. Our office was blocked by the military and police. The internet was switched off. So that kind of state of affairs, you see, sometimes we believe is being allowed by the international community, which continues to support Museveni with a lot of money and his regime, and really to allow all this to go on. So that is why we think that it is also very, very important to actually go very, very strongly on the international line.
Mr. Lewis Rubongoya, we'll go for a short commercial break, and when we come back, more of this discussion.
933 KFM's Hot Seat. Hear the real story behind the story. Coming right at you. Only on 933 KFM.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to 933 KFM. This is the Monday edition of the Hot Seat, and standing in for Patrick Kamara is me, Kwezi Tabaro. Today, I'm joined in studio by Mr. David Lewis Rubongoya, who is a lawyer and Secretary General of the National Unity Platform, the leading opposition party in Uganda. And we're discussing politics within and outside the NUP. In the first segment, we talked about the apparent unease within the party amongst what many consider the moderates, more established politicians that recently joined NUP from other traditional parties, as well as what many consider the youngsters, the firebrand members of the party. And this is all playing out in Nyendo Mukugwe division in Masaka City, which happens to be the constituency represented by the Honorable Matthias Mpuga, the outgoing leader of opposition. In studio now is David Lewis Rubongoya, who has eventually made it. Lewis, we're talking about the last 4 years of the NUP party. Today also happens to be the 42nd birthday of the NUP founder and president, Mr. Robert Chagulanyi. When you started this movement 3-5 years ago, you were fairly young people in your mid to late 30s. As you enter your 40s, adulthood has certainly set in, and more is expected of you. How has that transition been from activists on the street? Yes, you are still activists in a sense, but now you're in charge of the second biggest party in parliament, but also the biggest opposition party in the country.
Yeah, I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to wish our president a very happy birthday, and we thank God for his life. Like I did mention elsewhere, that some of us who saw him at Machindi military prison after the Arua incident did not think he would live to actually see this. But to see that he's been able to make 42 is a miracle in itself, and we thank God for that. For that. So, of course, every time you grow, there are new challenges, new opportunities, and many things that you learn. Like I told you, for example, earlier on, that it's been a learning curve. Unfortunately or fortunately for freedom fighters, you just go straight into the arena and see how it plays out. So when we started out, we saw the suffering of the people of Uganda, and that continues to happen. We saw the mess there is in this country, and of course we came together from different fields. I was a lecturer, as you know, teaching our president constitutional law, and he was this artist. And so when we met, and together with other people, we started talking about what was going on in this country, and we said, you know what, enough is enough. And so we said, let's go out there. Of course, there are many things we did not expect. But as you continue to grow and interact with new facts and new challenges, it becomes apparent what you're dealing with. And I'll just give you an example. Previously, for me, naively, I thought if someone said they're opposition, they are opposition. And so it was very easy to trust Norbert Mao. It was very easy to, because it was
the Honorable Norbert Mao, Minister for Justice.
Exactly. It was very easy. But as we went along, one time our president was under house arrest, and he managed to escape, and he met some opposition leaders, quote unquote. And as soon as he met them, the police was notified that he was no longer at home, and they withdrew from the premises immediately.
Amongst these people you're talking about,
I don't want to disclose those particular people, but the point I'm making is that you get to learn the context in which you're operating. So, he thought, these are opposition leaders. So when he left home in a rubber-dub style, he went straight to the home of one of these opposition leaders. They had a chat, blah, blah, blah. But before he left, the police was notified. And so they withdrew from home. And so that was an experience. So the point I'm making is that every day that passes, we learn new things. But and certainly, we are ready to take on this country and make the lives of our people better. You see, I've been stuck in traffic jam now, I don't know for how long. But what is causing all this? The terrible roads, poor infrastructure, and many other issues. So there are real issues that we need to resolve for the people of Uganda.
What do you have to say about party discipline within the NUP? You rightly said, a few minutes ago that, when you joined opposition, you thought opposition meant opposition, and that you're discovering the opposite now. Of course, it's no longer secret that some members of the NUP, amongst them Honorable Dr. Twaha Kagabo, who is the MP for Bukoto South in Masaka, have come out to clearly say, yes, much as they are NUP members, they are open to joining other formations, in this case, the Patriotic League of Uganda, that is championing General Muhoozi Kainerugaba's political agenda.
Well, I already talked about those people. One, it is important to know that, political parties in Uganda find themselves in a very, very precarious situation. Because political party by their nature should be operating in a democratic environment where it is a competition of ideas, you're presenting your views to the people and the people decide. But in Uganda's case, that's not what is happening. You have one party state which clothes itself as a multi-party system and therefore uses carrot and stick approaches here and there. So it's called a hybrid regime. They will allow you have some members of parliament every once in a while win a case, but on the fundamental issues they are holding a firm grip on power and the country generally. So those are the challenges we have. Now, one of the outcomes of that is massive corruption, political corruption, that has come to define our politics. You've seen, I've just mentioned some people. You have members of the opposition who are serving in Museveni's cabinet. And what is very sad is that the money which is always involved, you see, for example, the controversy in FDC. You remember the monies you were talking about, that money came into FDC to make sure that it destroys NUP. You remember that? That was really the cause of the issues now in FDC. They were talking about 7 billion. It could have been more, it could have been less. But this is taxpayers' money.
Lewis, I want us to focus on NUP, the party, because the party has, the ability to discipline its members, to beat them in two line, and I believe you have a disciplinary committee, and as a Secretary General, you certainly sit on such a committee. Are there sanctions in place that the NUP can, fall back to bring these members into line? But also, there are procedures that would allow you to get these members out of parliament, don't you think?
Well, for a very big opportunity that I've gotten like now, I wouldn't want to limit myself to the internal workings of NUP, because then we will be cheating our listeners if we don't tell them about the context. The first question is, how did Kagabo, for example, end up where he is, and how did Jimmy Rwangai? There's a video recently of Kagabo showing off a very nice car, saying, struggle na jibalekera. So, meaning that
he has left you in the struggle.
This is his understanding of the struggle. A nice car. So, majority of the people, if General Museveni or whoever gives him a car, that does not take away the suffering of the people of Namuongo. The people in Chana Mukaka are still going to be suffering. So yes, about the internal party mechanisms, like I told you recently, we had our constitution gazetted. That constitution has mechanisms in place to discipline errant members, to, do different things. And you'll see us evoke some of those processes very soon. But that said,
why I'm raising that is because this is something that is within your power to do as a party, to set the standard, to set the rules, because what you talk about is what has bedeviled other opposition parties, DP, FDC, JEMA, and to a certain extent even the NRM itself is disorganized. There's a lot of party indiscipline. So if NUP represents a future for Uganda, a different future, or a new formation. Certainly, these are some of the things that for which the public will hold you to a higher standard.
Well, like I said, and I'm glad you've talked about all those political parties. And the reason why they've gone through those challenges is because of the context. Recently, we did an audit together with other, forces of change. And we were asking ourselves, have these political parties gotten to where they are mostly because of internal factors or external factors? And the conclusion was external factors.
External in this sense?
The hand of the regime. The hand of the regime bringing in what now in FDC they call dirty money, trying to bring about division. Even these stories about massacre and all that, I believe some of them are sponsored. The regime has to make sure that all political parties are in some kind of fight at any one point. And so we as NUP have refused to give them what they want. Yes, at some point we will take certain actions, like I said. But for us, our theory, remember, is people power. We believe in that as our strategy, as our core philosophy. People power, the power of the people. And so any errant person who betrays the people, we subject that person to the people.
Certainly on that. And I know the supporters of NUP in Bukoto South who voted in the previous election have not gone away. Are you trying to engage them to see if they can recall their member of parliament if he indeed no longer represents them?
But under the current constitution, it's no longer possible to recall such members of parliament. And that's the context I'm talking about. Because under a democratic dispensation, the voters should have an opportunity to recall a member of parliament who has gone against their wishes and wills. And indeed, the moment that man, Jimmy Rwanga and Kagabo, decided to do what they did,
these are still members of parliament and members of the NUP, but you seem to refer to them as ordinary people on the streets.
Of course, no.
These are honorable members of the House.
Come on, you see, I've said previously that one of the largely misused words in Uganda is honorable, and of course, word patriotism. I saw these folk who call themselves Patriotic League. It's extremely these are the most misused words. So, what is honorable about you being elected on NUP? On the basis that you're going to fight for the people, and the moment you get in there, 2 years later, you decide to cross and join, not a political party, but you're joining people who are responsible for the suffering, the massive suffering of the people of Uganda, people who voted for you.
You're listening there to the voice of David Lewis Rubongoya, the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform Party. We'll take a short commercial break, and when we come back, more of this discussion.
933 KFM. The hottest debate on all relevant topics live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to 933 KFM. This is the Monday edition of the Hot Seat, and standing in for Patrick Kamara is me, Kwezi Tabaro. Today in studio, I'm joined by Mr. David Lewis Rubongoya. He's the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform, the leading opposition party in Uganda, and we're discussing developments within the party as well as their plans ahead of the 2026 elections. Mr. Rubongoya, last year ended with... all right, I see your GPS. Yes, last year ended with mobilization drives that your party codenamed Kunga, which is I think a Luganda word for bringing people together, mainly in central and western Uganda. And many of these rallies were not interrupted by the police. We saw significant numbers of your supporters turn up. Your party had promised to take the same to the eastern and northern part of the country this year. Is that still on the agenda?
Yeah, and I already mentioned it that, of course, we had a very, very energizing tour of the country. But you remember what happened? After the regime saw the numbers that these tours were attracting. One, they wrote to us to say that we should stop them because the life of our president was in danger. They said terrorists, they had gotten information that terrorists were going to attack him on the trail. When we ignored that, then they brought another one and said we were promoting sectarianism, blah, 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 and so blocked them based on that. So we indeed wanted to immediately announce a second tour and continue with it, but that was one of the factors. And then we said, let's engage with different kinds of activities. And you saw we went ahead to launch our offices. Of course, you remember the first day it was also blocked, and then there was a lot of disorganization by the regime, deliberately trying to make sure they limit the numbers that were coming in. But we've been engaging with different activities. Like I said, we shall soon announce another program to go around the country, because we intend to continue mobilizing the nation for change. Even right now, that's why I'm here. I'm speaking to the nation, and that's what we want to continue doing.
Talking about mobilizing the population for change, we've seen at many of these activities you've brought together many other political actors from the FDC, from the ANT. What assurances do you give Ugandans about the potential of the united forces for change, perhaps presenting a joint candidate in the upcoming elections?
Well, we are having preliminary discussions, but one of the things I've told you already is that the people who are listening in to us should know the challenges and the context in which they operate. I'll tell you, Kwezi, that I attended more than 50 meetings in the run-up to the 2021 election, trying to, forge a way forward to say, let's have one candidate. But it turns out that some of the people who are always within those meetings are now ministers in Museveni's cabinet. You know that? So people need to understand the context in which you operate. People need to understand that it's not as easy as saying, let's have one presidential candidate. The context is what we need to deal with. We need to, first of all, be able to remove and replace the regime at hand so that we can have a functional democracy. We can have political parties operating where you've seen what has been going on in Kenya. People go into elections with alliances, different political parties coming together on a clearly defined agenda. Here in this country, we are still dealing with a very, very difficult system, which is a military capture, a state capture that has its hands everywhere in the political opposition, in different institutions of the state, and even the non-state institutions out there.
Then doesn't this lay credence to what some of your fellow political actors have done, realizing that you cannot uproot the system? They've decided to work within the NRM and perhaps change the system from within, because what you're talking about is the very extreme of is a very extreme side of looking at things, and many would cite examples in our neighborhood in Sudan or in Egypt that it's very easy to topple what you consider a repressive regime, but the instruments of that regime can easily mobilize, and then the very progressive forces that thought that they had gained power are soon thrown out. You saw that with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. You saw that with the professionals group in Sudan.
Well, first of all, I've not said that it is impossible. One, we are called upon to deal with difficult situations.
But you're castigating members of the opposition who have worked with...
No, I've actually said that majority of those, from our understanding, were already working. And that's why I said that the hope of the people of Uganda should always be in themselves, not in politicians. Because tomorrow... General Museveni can put some billions on the table and buy
those politicians.
Our president himself has told the people of Uganda that is why I believe in people power. To say that, look, even me, if tomorrow I wake up and leave what I stand for today, the people of Uganda will reject me. So none of us can claim to be. So that is why our philosophy remains people power. Because we have seen it countless times here. Dictators can wake up and even kill a political leader, leave alone this issue of compromising them. One day we might wake up and everyone is killed or in detention or whatever. But the people of Uganda will have to continue the struggle for liberation, because the issues which we are standing on, the issues which got me out of my classroom to come and be in the trenches, are still standing. The high levels of unemployment, poverty, the terrible infrastructure, high levels of corruption, and those other kinds of things.
Do the United Forces of Change all agree on those issues?
Of course. In terms of, we have what we call a minimum agenda. The United Forces of Change all agree that, first of all, our country is under capture and we need to free our nation from this capture. With regard to going into the next election, that's a debate we'll have. But right now what we're engaging with as the United Forces of Change is to rally the population for change. Because like we've said, dictators, some of them have fallen before elections, others have fallen during elections, others have fallen after elections. So every time is ripe for the fall of a dictatorial regime, of a military regime.
And you said there was a minimum?
A minimum agenda, a minimum a plan of action.
Yes, many Ugandans, when they listen to some of the political representatives of the United Forces for Change, they're left wondering whether there is even a coherent idea on what exactly needs to be done, because one day you're dismissing the current government and saying it's illegitimate, and then on the other hand you're tussling it out within your parties to take up positions within what you consider to be an illegitimate government.
Yeah, of course. One of the things, like I told you need to understand the context. And our context is not very different from, for example, what is happening in Zimbabwe right now. In Zimbabwe, first of all, our brother Chamisa, the regime took over MDC, the leader of opposition, and he started another formation called CCC, Citizens Coalition for Change. Recently, it was also taken over, and he has had to resign, and several other members of parliament. But there are those who have given their reasons to say, let's use these positions to fight. So once you're dealing with regimes of this nature, you find that there are all these ideas that keep coming in and the contestations. So one of the things I can say is that there are many people who feel that by taking on these positions, which first of all are not gifted by the regime. A person is elected member of parliament, another is elected mayor, another is elected. These are positions which are bestowed on these by the people of Uganda. So some people say it would be a betrayal for me to be elected member of parliament and not take up my role because the regime has rigged elections and that kind of thing. But of course there is also a section which thinks we should not at all engage. So these are debates that we engage with every day. There's, for example, right now, if you see on Twitter and other places, some Ugandans feel we should not go into the next election, it's a waste of time. Many others think we should still participate for different objectives.
And since you're the Secretary General, what is your party's stance on that?
What I can say is that with regard to the 2026 election, we are yet to discuss that. But for the 2021 election, we were clear. We had a discussion and said, we know how this election will go. We know what is likely to be there. But let us go into this election with a view of, first of all, engaging with the population, being able to reach places that we would never reach, outside the election season. Right now, if I go to a certain place and try to hold a rally, you know what will happen. In many places, they are blocking football games. The other day, they abducted our councillor, who is still missing for more than two weeks. On the weekend, they abducted another young man called Nasif. So when you're dealing with that kind of situation, sometimes the campaign season gives you an opportunity to reach far and wide, and also to be able to mobilize and rally the population for change. But like I said, these are debates.
Would you say that within NUP, yours is one struggle with many fronts?
Absolutely. But that has always been clear. We have...
doesn't seem to be clear to a section of your party who seem to suggest that you shouldn't have anything to do with this, what they consider an illegitimate government.
No. Of course, I've not said that we should engage with this regime. For example, we've been very clear that actually, for the sake of this country, we would be open to the idea of dialogue, even with the current regime. But what kind of dialogue is it? It must be genuine. It must be about the transition. It must have a clear agenda. It must be convened by someone that can be trusted.
And in this case, who can be trusted? Because you seem to suggest that even members of the opposition are working for the regime.
You'll see different countries. In Kenya, there was dialogue. Who presided over the dialogue. You look at the DRC at some point. You look at South Africa when they are dealing with the apartheid regime. Some actors may be internal, others might be external. But the point has always been that General Museveni and his regime believe in cooptation. That is their strategy of dialogue. That is the idea of dialogue. Get Mao, appoint him a minister, get so and so, give them some billions of taxpayers' money, and then that's dialogue for them. For us, we have been saying that if there is to be dialogue, it should be about the future of this country.
Thank you very much, David Lewis Rubongoya. We'll take a short commercial break, and when we come back, NUP's international agenda.
933 933 KFM. KFM's KFM's Hot Seat. Hear the real story behind the story. Coming right at you. Only on 933 KFM.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to 933 KFM. This is the last segment of the Monday edition of the Hot Seat. I'm standing in for Patrick Kamara, Kwezi Tabaro here. And in studio today, I'm joined by David Lewis Rubongoya, who is the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform Party, the leading opposition party in Uganda. Over the last 3 quarters of the show, we're discussing developments within the party internally. But David, I wanted us to spread our wings a little bit on this issue of the missing NUP supporters. It's an issue you've raised domestically, but also it's been a key segment of your international campaign, highlighting, the occurrences during the last campaigns, but also the disappearances of people in these vans called drones in the aftermath of the election. This featured prominently in the documentary Bobi Wine, the People's President. What do you intend to achieve with this international campaign about your missing people?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's very, very sad that in 2024 we're talking about missing persons. Immediately after elections, we had over 5,000 people who were being detained in unknown places. Of course, majority of them were freed after months of torture, of all sorts of things, to a point that we had about 30, and then several of them were eventually freed. Now there are 18 people who are missing from the election. But since then, abductions have continued. Almost every week, we receive a report of an abduction. People are taken for 3 months, 4 months. There's something that happens which we still don't understand. Every person who is taken is injected with different substances. They don't understand. So it's a very, very tragic state of affairs that you have 18 families who do not know the whereabouts of their people. Chibalama John Bosco was taken in 2019. Many others were taken in 2020. Others were taken in 2021. And sadly, these abductions have not stopped. I've just told you about Owen Mwanga. He was picked up on the day we screened the documentary, Bobi and the People's President, at office. Later on, this police spokesperson came out to confirm that he's in the hands of security. But up to now, he has not been taken to court. His family has not been able to access him. Nobody knows where he is. On the weekend, they took away one Mulindwa Nassif, who has been working with a group called Freedom Borders. These are border guys who believe in change, who believe in our president. And we don't know where he is. So these abductions have continued. And if you've followed our posts on social media, almost every other week or 2 weeks, we are talking about a new abduction.
Have you made any progress on getting back the 18 missing people? Because this is an issue you raised in Parliament. There was a boycott of parliamentary sessions by the opposition. The Uganda Human Rights Commission was involved at some point. The Minister of Internal Affairs had to make a statement. What are the latest developments? Yeah,
so that's what I was coming to. First of all, give the situation analysis and then talk about what has happened and why are we doing what we're doing internationally and all that. One, you know that the institutions in Uganda are really part of the problem. You have the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which is headed by one Maria Mwangadia, and you've seen how she speaks about human rights. Really, you even a first-year law student, in my honest opinion, would do a better job as a chairperson of Human Rights Commission than Maria Mwangadia.
Without discussing personalities, if we stick
because
to the issues,
this is a very, very important office she holds. You cannot come out and say these are Chiwani when they are families. You see them every day crying. These families have reported to UHRC, they have reported to the police. We have recently filed a case in courts of law. We have gone to Parliament, and then she comes up to say, Chiwani.
But so don't you think the Uganda Human Rights Commission has, or at least in the course of this issue, has been helpful in highlighting your issue, bringing it to the attention of the House? And
no, they are not the ones who took it to the House. It was the Lope and his team who took it to the House.
But I saw correspondence between your party and the Human Rights Commission.
Of course, we have been filing cases almost all the time about these missing persons. And like I said, every time a person disappears, we either go to court for habeas corpus or we write to the Uganda Human Rights Commission. And many times when these young people are released, with wounds and torture marks and all that, we again report to the UHRC or the courts of law to see if these cases can be handled. So that is why, for example, we had to go to the ICC, file a case there. That is why we have been on an international offensive. Because we know that the institutions in Uganda are not working.
So
That's
you've
why
exhausted all possibilities of dealing with this issue domestically?
We have not yet exhausted all of them. Like we want to be on record. That's why we've been to Parliament. We have engaged the UHRC. We have engaged the UN Human Rights body here before it was eventually closed down, the UN Human Rights Office. But we have also engaged international mechanisms. Like I said, we have gone to the ICC, but also we've been talking to the to these funders who give Uganda money to say evoke the Magnitsky sanctions, for example, against renowned human rights violators. If people are violating human rights with impunity, and maybe they are sanctioned and they cannot travel to Europe and to the US and other places, maybe that's something. Because for them, the impunity is too much. They know that the Ugandan systems cannot touch them. You remember one time when people took General Kaihura to court. You remember that incident? And then the court was raided. So, if you cannot rely on courts of law to give you justice, but like I said, we still file these cases to be on record.
Okay, but have you made any progress with Ugandan institutions? In this case, I know the Prime Minister was keenly involved in this matter.
The Prime Minister, Robin Anabanja, said that Chibalama is in their hands. She said that on TV.
This was a few years ago.
Yes. And up to now, Chibalama has not been found. We've been asking her, and I still ask her on this show, where is Chibalama? Because she said that Chibalama was arrested in her statement from Kachiri, that he was being accused of killing policemen and that kind of thing. So where is he? Take him to court if he committed an offense.
So no progress on any of the 18 missing persons?
No progress whatsoever, except extortion. Many people have been coming to tell these people, oh, I know where your person is, give us 2 million shillings, and then the person all of a sudden switches off their phone. So it's been, it's such a horrific situation, especially for these families.
And apart from the international campaign, what else are you doing as a party to make sure that these 18 missing people are brought back?
Like I said, there are not only 18. There are many that we've been fighting for, and we continue to fight for them. And we are not talking about the 18 only. Remember that we have our people are still in detention at Chitalia and other places. We have a robust legal team which is representing them, following up on their cases. We have people almost in every prison that you can talk of in this country. NUP supporters were taken there for political reasons.
And what do you have to say about some of the alleged victims of torture who are NUP supporters coming out to the media and saying that, you know what, we were in fact not tortured by the security services. Some of them had, were involved in motor vehicle accidents. One of them, in fact, spoke at a national function that was attended by the president last week.
Well, you're talking about, for example, Eric Mwesigwa, a young man who was tortured,
He said he was burnt with a flat iron.
Burnt with a flat iron, and then later paraded by Kulaije. But you remember, after all the promises they made him and they're not fulfilled, he came out again in the media.
But then there was another young man.
Yeah, and that one, Dr. Besi actually came out and talked about him because that was an FDC activist. He was never in NUP at all. He was involved with FDC. He was indeed knocked by a security vehicle. Dr. Besi was involved in trying to treat him and that kind of thing. So it's not surprising. And that's why I said that the people listening in to us should focus on the context in which we operate. You see, after torturing people, almost every person who has been tortured, our supporters, including Masereka, this lady who was raped, called Marinos, they approached them to say, now you should go into the media and tell them that it is actually NUP which was trying to parade you so that we give you money. There's even another one who they are trying to approach from Kasese. They tortured him, did terrible things to him, and recently they approached him. The young man you saw at Kavulehus who talked about how he was sodomized and subjected to all sorts of torture, they have been approaching him to say, you go back and say that you were lying. Of course, those who are able to withstand the pressure are able to, and many of them have had to run to exile. Instead of coming out to lie against their conscience, they end up in exile. But that is how this regime operates. And that for me is what pains me, that this is taxpayers' money. The person who is listening in to us now, who is stuck in traffic jam because of bad roads, who is listening in to us, the money they pay in taxes is the one which the regime uses for these kinds of games.
All right. Thank you, Lois. One last question before we leave the show. You spoke on this very show earlier on, and you said that there are term limits for every position within the NUP. So you won't be Secretary General for 15 years. Are there chances that you're considering an MP seat in the upcoming election?
Not yet, not at this time, but who knows?
By this time, you mean not this year, possibly
no,
next
like I said,
year?
it's not something I'm thinking about right now. But who knows? We will have everything I do or we do as leaders. We first discuss and see the merits, demerits, and basically see what works for the broader struggle to redeem ourselves from dictatorship. And when that time comes and the decisions are made, we shall certainly notify the nation.
And your own party president, there's been talk of perhaps some MPs resigning their position so he could be in parliament?
Of course not. That's not something he has considered. That's not something that has been discussed.
All right. Thank you very much, David Lewis Rubongoya. You've been listening to the National Unity Platform Party Secretary General, David Lewis Rubongoya, and we've been discussing internal developments within the party as well as NUP's agenda for the country. We'll be right back tomorrow with an even interesting topic and more discussions on this. Good night.